All stand, please. Please be seated.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Tempano. Please continue.
Thank you, Your Honour. Now, Mr. Thomas, I've asked the court operator to bring up on screen again photograph 10 from the TFS report. We've obviously spent a little time now establishing what the probable fuel load was in the area that was ultimately burned around the tree stump. Could I now ask you to imagine the conditions as they existed immediately prior to the fire that happened in this area on the 3rd of January 2013, and in particular, could you introduce to your mental image the idea of the west-norwesterly wind blowing strongly across that area? Now, I put it to you, Mr. Thomas, that a fire igniting in this area, in those fuel conditions and those wind conditions on that day, would have travelled fairly rapidly towards the east.
Yes, I would agree with that.
And you gave evidence that you would not expect it to have backed very much.
Correct. That's once flaming combustion occurred, of course.
And I put it to you, Mr. Thomas, that such a fire in those conditions is very unlikely to have been able to transfer enough heat into the wood of a tree root emerging through the soil in that area at any point, such as to be able to do anything more than perhaps slightly scorch the surface of the root.
Everything depends on the actual circumstances at the time. Occasionally, situations happen that is never expected, and that this could well be one of those situations as well. And I'm not saying that it would never be expected, but there might be a hole, there might be, as I've attempted to say, there might be a gathering of leaves or bark or whatever in or around one of those holes, which has caused a reason for heat to stay in that particular location for a longer period of time. This happens with wildfires all the time, which is why you have reignition of wildfires. But I'm not, having said that, I'm not disagreeing with your premise that this would have, once flaming combustion occurred with this fine fuel, the grass, the fire would have extended across that surface reasonably quickly, particularly in the circumstances of the wind.
Okay, well, let's just deal with the couple of examples that you just gave. And I'm going to ask you some questions by reference to the notion of probability and what is more probable than not. Do you understand the concept?
Yes.
Now, what you see of this area, would you agree with me that it is more probable than not that there were not build-ups of significant levels of leaf litter or bark or other flammable detritus at any particular location across the area that you see being burned here?
There's no evidence to suggest there was build-ups, no.
Thank you. Now, if we imagine the circumstance that there was some kind of build-up of that kind of debris in a particular location, would you agree with me that it was more probable than not that it would still have been a very low volume of debris material?
Based on what we know, yes.
Thank you. And would you agree with me that it is more probable than not that such a low level of debris material, even if it had built up in a given location, would burn away to carbonised ash in a matter of seconds.
No, I'm not sure that I'd agree with that. It all depends on the location, how it was, etc.
Well, would you agree with me that it's more probable than not that any such build-up of debris would have been extremely desiccated, very dry?
Certainly on the surface, possibly not below the surface of that, if there was such a build-up.
All right, and would you agree with me that it is more probable than not that even if there were some kind of flammable debris close to a tree root that somehow emerged from the surrounding soil, then the time that it would take to combust that debris makes it more probable than not that the burning process would do little more than scorch the surface of the tree root.
Again, depends on so much.
I understand it depends on many things, but having regard to all of the variables that we've discussed, would you agree with me that from everything you've seen here, everything that you observed when you attended the site yourself, it is more probable than not that if there was burning material on this ground that came close to a tree root emerging from the soil, that burning material would effectively carbonize so quickly that it was unlikely to do more than scorch the surface of the tree root.
The reason why I'm having problems with your hypothesis that you're putting is that there were clearly a couple of holes apparent, I think as demonstrated in photograph 6 of my report. Now, if there'd been a build-up of debris, leaf matter, bark, etc. in those holes, and the heat was contained and the root was extending out through one of those holes, it wouldn't be a rapid fire. The heat could have been held in as a result of the earth around it, and as a result, a smouldering fire could have occurred in a root.
And absent that very, very precise scenario that you've just described, I take it you would otherwise agree with me?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And all right. I take it you were aware when you were conducting your investigation, Mr. Thomas, that the TFS investigators had had their attention drawn to charcoal when they examined this area of origin, and that the charcoal they observed, they noticed because it was black lying against the differently coloured surface of the ground around it.
Well, I'm not quite sure why they noticed it, but it's clearly apparent in their photographs.
Well, you understand from the description that they provided in the report that what they saw was a tree root that seemed to be sitting had emerged through the surface of the soil.
Yes.
And I take it then that you would agree with me that a tree root in that scenario is unlikely to have been ignited by the operation of burning vegetation material on the surface around it.
I don't know that I could agree with that. No, I'm sorry.
I thought you just agreed with me a moment ago, Mr. Thomas, that absent the very specific scenario that you described of a tree root that happens to cross or be exposed to a hole in the ground, where that hole itself forms a neat little protective shelter for a build-up of leaf litter, absent that particular scenario, you would agree that burning material on the ground in this area was unlikely to be able to transfer enough heat into a tree root to turn that tree root into charcoal.
Yes, I'd agree with that, yes.
And you would agree with me that it's unlikely to be able to transfer enough heat into that tree root to do anything more than scorch the surface of the tree root.
No, I'm sorry. I may well have said that I agree to the previous question that you said when I didn't properly understand the question, Mr. Armstrong.
All right.
If a fire occurs in something, heat is generated and it's reduced to charcoal, it could occur for any one of a number of reasons. It's the application of heat that causes that to occur.
Mr. Thomas, can I ask you to imagine a scenario where a tree root emerges from the very surface of the soil and not in a hole surrounded by leaf debris? Do you understand the scenario I'm talking about?
Yes.
You might well imagine it as relatively flat ground, perhaps a little undulation of gravel, but it just happens that there's a tree root that appears.
Yes.
The fuel load around it is the sort of thing that we see in the unburned photographs of this picture.
Yes, I understand
that
yes.
assumption as well. I put it to you that in the weather conditions that existed on the 3rd of January, if the fuel of this kind around a root emerging from the surface in the way that I've asked you to assume, if the fuel had itself been exposed to a flame, I'm putting to you that that fuel in those conditions would have burned itself out so quickly that it would not have done more than lightly scorch the surface of the root.
I could have consumed the root as well.
All right.
Depending on how fine the root is.
I thought you were about to say that. Can I ask you to make the assumption that the root itself was about 20 millimetres thick? Let's go with 10 to 20 millimetres. Put it to you again that the fuel of this kind burning in those conditions on that day is very unlikely to have been able to transfer enough heat to such a root that it would cause the root itself to develop a self-sustaining, propagating, smouldering burn.
I agree in principle. I agree with what you're saying on the basis that you're explaining it. Yes.
Thank you. All right. Now, can we move to your third report? And this is the report where you respond to some further instructions that asked you to comment on the significance of reports that Ms. Barrett had observed steam rising from the stump or the area of the stump in the days after the campfire, not the bushfire. Have I accurately summarised what your objective was here?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, firstly, could we go to, in fact, before I do that, just to be clear, Mr. Thomas, you went to 242 White Hills Road on 3 occasions, didn't you?
At least 3 occasions, yes.
Okay. Well, we've covered off the 20 August 2013, the 30th of March 2014, and the 5th of April 2014.
Correct.
Were there any other occasions?
Yes, there were.
All right. When were they?
I can't recall.
Okay. Do you recall which year?
I believe I attended again in 2013. I attended again with legal representatives. I can't recall what years and I think that was on more than one occasion as well.
Okay. Who were the legal representatives?
Mr. Knight and Mr. Reid.
Okay. So if I said that that was probably after December 2018, would that sound right to you?
Possibly not in the case of Mr. Knight.
Right. Okay. Now, none of your reports refer to any of those other occasions on which you attended, do they?
No, they don't.
Right. And I take it that you're not suggesting that anything that you did or observed on those occasions has any bearing on any of the assumptions that, on any of the matters that you address in your 3 reports?
Correct, yes.
Thank you. Now, in relation to this 3rd report, it would be, perhaps if Mr. Temponi could display on screen pages 0412 and 0413. That's pretty much the guts of this report. Right, thank you, Mr. Temponi. Now, can I just draw your attention first, Mr. Thomas, to the bottom paragraph on the left-hand side? That's the second part of paragraph 2.1.
Yes.
And ask you just to read to yourself the first sentence. Now, Mr. Thomas, the thrust of your approach in respect of this 3rd report was that because you had found no root charring that you associated with the subject stump, therefore you discounted Ms. Barrett's observations of steam, correct?
Placed less weight on it, yes.
Well, I'm only using your own words, Mr. Thomas. You said you discounted. You didn't have any regard, did you?
I'm saying, yes, I used the word discounted in that report. You're quite correct. However, I placed less weight on it as a result of my excavation of the root structure. Yes, that is correct.
All right. And you didn't mention the steam in either of your previous reports, did you?
No.
No. So there was nothing to indicate to His Honour that you'd taken it into account at all?
No.
Right, thank you. Now, Mr. Thomas, I put it to you that to discount Ms. Barrett's reports of steam because you had not found root charring is putting the investigation the wrong way round, isn't it?
I wouldn't have thought so.
Surely, Mr. Thomas, you need to start by assuming that Ms. Barrett's report was accurate and then inquire as to what might have explained that observation of steam.
I would agree with that.
And that's not what you did, is it?
Well, the fact that the root structure was excavated by myself and showed no evidence of fire extending from the stump would suggest to me that the information of steam coming from the stump, whilst it may have suggested there was heat in the stump, there was no evidence of fire extending from the stump or smouldering roots or anything like that from the stump. And in fact, there'd been rain on the days prior to the 3rd, on my understanding. And if there was heat in the stump, that may well have extinguished the fire in any event, if there was heat in it.
All right. Well, we'll come to the notion of heat in the stump in a moment. Let's just focus on roots to begin with. Now, I take it, Mr. Thomas, you accept that the phenomenon of smouldering burns in underground roots is a well-recognised phenomenon.
It occurs, it can occur.
Right. Well, it's well documented. It's a well-known risk.
It's documented, yes, it is a known risk, absolutely.
And, well, let's not be squeamish about this, Mr. Thomas. It's a well-known risk amongst fire investigators, isn't it?
Yes.
Thank you. And the significance, I beg your pardon, the mechanism involved in a smouldering burn involves the application of heat to cause changes in the chemical structure of the wood fibres in a low oxygen environment. That's what causes the smouldering burn as opposed to a free burn.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you. And you would agree with me that a smouldering burn can occur in any low oxygen environment?
Yes, it can, yes.
And when we're talking about a root system, it can occur in roots which are fairly shallowly buried, as well as roots which are more deeply buried.
Correct, yes.
And you know, don't you, that tree roots, as they extend away from the tree itself, can undulate at different depths in the soil.
Yes.
And you would expect, wouldn't you, that if there were rain on an area where there was a smouldering burn going on in a root system, then the rain might well fall onto a patch of soil where the root was fairly shallowly buried.
May well, yes.
And in that scenario, if the root were subject to a smouldering burn, the soil around it might be hot.
Correct, yes.
And rain falling on that soil might be turned to steam.
Yes.
And likewise, the rain might fall on an area where, although the root was burning, the root was more deeply buried in the soil.
Yes.
And the soil around that root, the surface soil above that root, is unlikely to be as hot, isn't it?
Correct, because we're relying on the heat transfer from the root, wherever it is, through the soil, and of course the soil's going to absorb some of that heat in the transfer process.
And you know, don't you, Mr. Thomas, that it takes actually an awful lot of water to properly extinguish burning coals or the kind of burning phenomenon that's involved in a smouldering root burn, doesn't it?
You may never extinguish it by putting on insurmountable amount of water if it doesn't get through to the root.
Right. Well, even just in relation to putting out a campfire, you're aware, aren't you, that the recommendation from the TFS in Tasmania, that was a superfluity, the recommendation from the TFS is that you need to pour enough water onto the campfire to virtually turn it into a soup.
Look, I'm not aware of that recommendation, but
Well,
that may well be the case.
Could I ask that Mr. Temponi brings up document 67? And within document 67, could we please go to well, could we go to the next page? This is a brochure. And the next page again. Is there another page? Could we try document 66? Or try 68? Oh, I'm sorry. All right, can we try
65.
PAM.001.001.0006. 64. That's it. Can we zoom out, please? Now, Mr. Thomas, have you seen TFS publications to that effect before?
No, I haven't.
All right. Is it your understanding of what good practice would be in terms of making sure that a campfire is out?
Only from my knowledge and experience.
So the answer is yes, I take it?
Yes.
Yep. And so if one, in order to put out a campfire safely, needs to soak it, then stir it, then soak it again, would you agree with me that when one is dealing with hot coals, it takes really a lot of exposure to water to be able to penetrate even the coal surface itself, and such that it extinguishes all of the combustion that might be going on within the piece of wood?
Yes, I agree.
And likewise, when we're talking about a smouldering burn in a root that might be about 20 millimetres thick, it's going to take a lot of water onto that root to extinguish all of the combustion activity that's going on in the root, isn't it?
If it's directly onto the root, it wouldn't take a whole lot of water, but if it's not directly onto the root, yes, it would take a significant amount of water.
All right. And
it may still not extinguish, as I think I said previously, Mr.
All right, thank you. And as part of your work for the purpose of preparing your expert reports, did you make it your business to check the Bureau of Meteorology records that might be available to indicate rainfall in the area of 242 Whitehills Road in the period between the 28th of December 2012 and the 3rd of January 2013?
I was provided information on rainfall in the area, yes.
Okay, and was it your understanding that over the whole of the period between the 28th of December and the 3rd of January there was really little more than a couple of millimetres of rain that had been recorded in the area?
I believe that was in early January, yes.
Right, thank you. And I put it to you, Mr. Thomas, that such a low volume of rain applied to the area around this tree stump in a situation where we are hypothesising that there was a smouldering underground burn in the root system is very unlikely to have had any effect in putting out that underground burn.
Absolutely. Anything that was underground, I agree with you. Yes.
Thank you. Now, can we then move to the notion that there was still heat in the tree stump itself as opposed to the underground roots? In section, and I think you addressed this in section 2.2 of your third report. Firstly, can you clarify for me, you seem to be addressing there a hypothesis that there was still heat, that is still combustion going on in the stump itself, and that in terms of the roots, they weren't burning, they were just, in fact I'll withdraw that, I'll try and make this clearer. In paragraph 2.2, you seem to be addressing the possibility that Dr. Marsden Smedley was suggesting that there was combustion going on in the tree stump itself, and that combustion was not causing burning of the roots, but simply causing the transfer of heat along the roots, and that transfer of heat was then the reason why there might have been steam rising from the ground around the stump. Am I right in understanding what you were addressing? Thank you. And so that scenario is really quite different from the one that I've been asking you to asking you questions about today, which is that there's burning going on in the roots themselves.
That's the assumption of the majority of your questions
Yes.
this morning, I believe, yes.
Thank you. Now, in relation to your consideration of the possibility that there was still heat rising from the stump, I take it then that you don't think that that is improbable at all.
That there was steam rising from the stump?
No, that there was still heat in the stump days after the campfire that would be sufficient to turn rain into steam.
If that's the case, yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, can I put it to you this way? His Honour's heard some evidence, Mr. Thomas, that, in fact, perhaps we'll do this by reference to a photograph. Could we go back to your report at document? No, we'll go to the TFS report at document 24. And could we go to photograph 28 again? And do you see the marker 7 up on the tree stump there?
Yes, I do,
Mr.
yes.
Thomas. Now, His Honour's heard some evidence to the effect that the steam that Ms. Barrett saw seemed to be rising not from the ground around the stump, but from about halfway up the tallest pointy bit of the blackened stump. So about, can you see that there's on the left-hand side of the stump, there's a protuberance that might look like Devil's Mountain from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And then you've got the middle peak that perhaps more closely resembles Mont Blanc. Do you understand the reference?
We're talking about the main stump here, not the rhinoceros horn that you referred to yesterday.
So we've got Devil's Mountain, then Mont Blanc, and then marker number 7.
Okay, yes, I'm with your descriptor.
Thank you. Doing the best I can.
It's difficult, I understand.
Now, His Honour's heard some evidence that the steam might have been rising from about halfway up Mont Blanc. Now, would you agree with me that if that report as to the location of the steam is correct, then it would suggest that there was combustion going on within the Mont Blanc section at the time that the rain was hitting it?
If by using the word consumption you mean smouldering, I agree, yes, if that, based on the hypothesis, yes.
Thank you. And I take it from the way that you've approached this issue in paragraph 2.2 of your third report that you don't find it at all improbable that a campfire of the kind that had been described in the information provided to you might have resulted in an ongoing smouldering burn within the section of the stump that we're looking at here, up to a few days later.
Absolutely, yes, I can well accept that.
Thank you. And were you aware at the time that you wrote your report that the TFS fire investigation report had included an observation that the tree stump itself still appeared to be warm at the time that the TFS investigators were examining the stump on the 6th of January?
I don't recall that.
Okay. Well, rather than take you to it, can I try and deal with this in a shorthand way? Would you consider it perfectly possible that a campfire lit inside the area around this tree stump on the 28th of December could have resulted in a smouldering burn that meant that the wood of the stump itself was still warm by the 6th of January?
I would find that hard to believe on the outside of the stump, but more probable internally in the stump.
Just to be clear about that reference, Mr. Thomas, could Mr. Temponi in this TFS report, document 24, take us to page 0018? And you see that there's in bold fire language at the top of the page, then a subheading area 1 and then
Yes.
subheading area 2, Mr. Thomas, and
Yes.
then the last sentence under area 2.
Yes,
sorry,
yes, I can see the sentence that you're referring to, commencing with the words "a brief physical examination."
yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And I should say I think that I was wrong, that that brief physical examination appears to be referring to the TFS first attendance on the 5th of January, not the 6th. But I take it that makes no difference. You would
No,
consider that even as at the 6th of January, it's perfectly plausible that there was still a smouldering burn going on inside the tree stump, resulting from the campfire on the 28th of December.
based on what's written in the TFS report, yes.
Thank you. Now, just lastly, Mr. Thomas, as a result of all of the investigations that you undertook at 242 White Hills Road and the way that you reviewed the TFS fire investigators' reports, you would agree, I take it, that there is no evidence of any other potential source of ignition of this fire beyond the burning root explanation that the TFS suggested, is there?
Based on the TFS report, yes, that's correct.
And based on your own examination of the site and your consideration of all of the available evidence?
I still find it difficult to completely eliminate a hot ember from something else, another fire situation that was occurring because of the fineness of the fuel in this area. It would be readily ignitable, and the conditions that occurred. There was no evidence of, I think in one of my reports I alluded to glass, smoking materials, deliberately lit fire. On my attendance there was no evidence of glass in the immediate vicinity, and I didn't see any evidence of smoking materials either.
And by smoking materials, I take it you mean cigarette smoking
Yes.
materials? Right, thank you. Now, you mentioned that you couldn't exclude the possibility of an ember from other fire activity. Do you mean an ember in the sense of a thrown cigarette, or an ember in the sense of some other wildfire that might have been going on in the area?
Yes, or some other potential heat source from a wildfire or from some other fire which was occurring in the area.
All right, thank you. Mr. Thomas, thank you for attending to my questions. Nothing further, Your Honour.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Armstrong. Mr. Reid.
I don't re-examine, thank you, Your Honour.
All right, thank you. Just before I relieve Mr. Morris, and I don't press you for an answer on this, Mr. Armstrong, but is the objection to Mr. Thomas's evidence still current, or is it now likely to be withdrawn?
Thank you, Your Honour. I'd forgotten about that one. No, we don't press that original objection.
Very well, then, Mr. Reid, all of the evidence that I've taken to Ben Assay from that point in time until now, I admit.
Yes, please.
Yes, thanks very much, Mr. Thomas, for your attendance. You're relieved on the trial. You're perfectly free to stay or watch it and come back or whatever if you want to.
Thank you, Your Honour.
Yes, Mr. Reid.
Yes, I call Anne Sutcliffe.
Remind me, is it Anne with an E or Anne without?
Without, according to the spelling I have.
Yes, thanks. Come on through, Ms. Sutcliffe. The witness box is just there. No need to be nervous about anyone in this courtroom.
Will you take an oath or choose to make an affirmation? Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Would you please say I swear?
I swear.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, if we've just given Ms. Sutcliffe a fresh water, that's a fresh bottle of water and cup before you there.
Oh, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Your Honour. Mrs Sutcliffe, your name is Anne Marie Sutcliffe,
Yes,
and you live at 42 Inala Road, Fawcett,
yes,
and you are the wife of Peter Sutcliffe.
yes.
Do you remember the day of the Fawcett Dunalley bushfire, the 3rd of January, the day before the fire hit Dunalley?
Yes,
And did you have contact with your husband that day?
yes.
What was the first contact you had with him in relation to the fire?
He rang me on when I was on my way home from work.
And what did he tell you?
There was a smoke and fire at the end of Inala Road. Could I ring the fire brigade?
And did you ring them?
Yes, when I got home. I was sort of a couple of seconds away from coming in the driveway anyway. So I rang them when I got in the house.
Yes. And did you delay between the time you got in the house and you made the call?
No.
Yes, but please.
Yes, thanks. Mr. Armstrong?
Mr. Cox will take this one, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks. Mr. Cox?
Thank you, Your Honour. As you were driving in, I should ask, did you see smoke when you were driving home?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you remember earlier in October 2012 there was a fire in the area around Dunalley Road?
Yes, out the end of Inala Road, yeah.
Yeah. And the Tas Fire Service turned up and dealt with that fire? You remember that?
I don't know.
You don't remember that Tas Fire Service did backburning near Darren Lawrence's
No.
property?
The smoke was out there. It was out there. It wasn't coming near home, so no.
Okay, you weren't troubled by it?
No.
Now, you'd agree with this, wouldn't you, that you live in an area of bushland that, you live in an area of bushland, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah, and a fire in an area of that type is a source of grave concern.
Yes.
Yeah, and if you saw a fire or smoke in your area, you'd call 000, wouldn't you, if you saw
Yes.
it? And you wouldn't delay about that, would you?
No.
No, because there wouldn't be any reason to delay about it.
No.
No. Now, your husband gave evidence yesterday that he called you and you then called the Tas Fire Service, or 000, that's...
Yes.
Yep. You've not previously given a statement to anyone about your discussions with him, have you?
No.
No. And it's now some 9 years since the 3rd of January, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Your husband, though, did give a statutory declaration, if I could ask that it please be brought up, document 46.0261. Just ask you to read the first 4 sentences there, Mrs. Sutcliffe.
Right.
Do you see there that his statutory declaration, and this is in 2013, says that you called him and said there was a fire near the property. Does that refresh your memory?
No, he rang me on my way home from work.
Did he ask you after giving evidence yesterday to confirm his version of events?
No.
No. Did you discuss his evidence yesterday?
No.
No. Can I suggest to you that that version, taken in 2013, is much more likely to be correct than your memory now today?
What was the question?
Okay, I'll put it. This statement was made in May of 2013. Okay, so 4 months after the 3rd of January. Yeah. Would you accept that it's likely to be more accurate in its content than your memory today?
No, he rang me. I didn't ring him.
Okay, so was he wrong there, was he, when he made that statutory declaration?
Well, there was a lot going on, so
Yeah.
he just rang. He rang me.
Yeah.
Right.
When you got home and called 000, you made observations of smoke in the area?
Yes.
Yep. And Were they up over towards White Hill Road?
No, they were directly at the end of Dunalley Road.
All right, okay. And Tas Fire Service, they were soon in attendance?
Yes.
Yep. Did you go down and have a look at the fire at all?
No.
You stayed at home, did you? All right. Where do you work, by the way, Mr. Sutton?
Tourist Park, Hobart Airport Tourist Park.
Okay, and you were coming back from there, were you?
Yes.
You were working over the holiday period?
Yes.
Yeah. Wasn't the case that you're at home, perhaps I suggest, and not working that day?
No, I was working that day.
Not the case that you actually saw the smoke and called your husband?
No.
Not the case that you then called Tas Fire Service around 2:15 on that day?
No.
All right. I presume because you saw the smoke on the way in that you would have called the fire service whether your husband called you or not?
Well, he was home and I said to him that there was a hell of a lot of smoke out the back, and he said, yeah, ring 000 now then.
Okay, so you had this discussion at home, did you?
No, he was laying on the couch, he had a crook back, he was half asleep, and I
Yep.
just went straight to the phone and rang the fire brigade.
Okay,
000.
So, right, I just want to get this clear. So, you arrived home,
Yes,
he was at home,
yes,
and this was at 42 Untitled Road.
yes.
He told you there's smoke or a fire or something to that effect, yes?
Now, he already told me that on the phone call that he rang me.
But you didn't call till he got home, is that right?
I got home.
Yes.
Yeah, I got home. I was only about halfway down the Dunalley Road and I got home when he rang me, and I just rang the fire brigade as soon as I walked in the door.
Yeah, so but where was he when he called you?
I don't know, I didn't ask him.
Okay. Why didn't you say to him, why don't you call them?
Well, he doesn't like using phones, so...
But he called you.
Yeah, because I'm on the top of his list on his mobile phone.
Okay. I'm still a little bit confused about the chronology here. Perhaps help me. So, when you got home, he was lying on the couch because he's got a crook back. Is that right?
Yeah.
Had he spent the day on the couch, to your knowledge?
No, he went to work in the morning.
He went to work and then drove home, presumably.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah. And was it your understanding he'd been on the couch with his crook back?
He was on the couch when I walked in the door, and then I got on the phone to 000.
Okay. But you'd already spoken to him on the phone while you were driving in?
Yeah, he said, how far away are you away? And I said, about 5 minutes.
I think he said before you were seconds away, but
Well,
it was a short period, I gather.
Yeah, short period of time before I walked in the door.
Okay, and so and then you called 000 after that?
Yes.
Nothing further, Your Honour.
Thanks, Mr. Cox. Anything in re-examination?
No, thank you, Your Honour. Secret left.
Thank you very much for your attendance, Mr. Sutcliffe. You're relieved on the trial. You're free to go if you want to, but you can stay if you want to.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Reid.
I call Constable Lindsay Needham.
Will you choose to make an oath or an affirmation? Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please say, I swear.
I swear.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Thanks, Constable Needham. Make yourself comfortable there. There's some fresh water if you feel the need.
Thank you.
Mr. Needham, are you Lindsay Charles Needham?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. And are you a constable in the Tasmanian Police with Forensic Services?
That's correct.
You've been a police officer since 1996.
That's right.
and a member of Forensic Services from 2001 to the present time.
That's correct.
As part of your forensic training, you received instruction in exhibit collection, crime scene photography, and general forensic procedures, both from a training officer and various practitioners within Hobart Forensic Services.
That's right.
And you have also undertaken training with the fingerprint section.
That's right.
Yes, and you've completed a unit of study in forensic photography at Canberra Institute of Technology.
Yes, I have.
Thank you. Now, at 9 a.m. on Sunday, the 6th of January, did you attend Delmore Road, Fawcett?
Yes, I did.
And you were there briefed in relation to an ongoing investigation into the cause of a large bushfire?
Yes, I was.
And who was present?
There was Steve Walkley, Tony Johnson and Barry Bones from Tasmanian Fire Service, and Detective Sergeant Matthew Adams and Detective Constable John Rafferty from the Hobart Criminal Investigation Bureau.
Thank you. Now, commencing at 10:30, did you record some video footage of commentary by Detective Sergeant Matthew Adams and firefighter Oliver Terenius?
Yes, I did.
And what did you use to record that?
I used my own personal video camera.
Thank you. Commencing at about 1 o'clock, did you photograph the examination of the fire scene by Fire Service Investigations?
Yes, I did.
And that was of the ground at 242 Whitehill Road, Fawcett, was it?
That's correct.
Thank you. Now, could we get document 101 up, please? And you've had the opportunity, have you, to look at these photographs?
Yes, I have.
And you're content that these are the photographs to which you refer?
That is correct.
And as to the metadata on them and its correctness, what do you say?
That is correct. I've checked that as well.
And is it correct?
Yes, it is.
Yes. Thank you. Now, when you arrived at 242, if we take the first photograph in the sequence, you'll see in that photograph some pink tape, you'll see some pink lines, and you'll see the green or perhaps yellow arrow.
That's correct.
Now, were they in place when you arrived?
Yes, they were.
And you followed that with photographs. If we go back to the thumbnails, please, Mr. Tempone. Photographs 2 through to 8 are photographs of that area. In fact, it may not be through to 8. Through to
about 11.
Through to about 11 are photographs of and within that area.
That is correct.
Right. Could we please get up photo 0009? Now, in relation to that photograph, you'll see a cone 20 there. Did you see that cone being placed?
No, that was already there, I believe. We can refer to some of the earlier photographs.
Thank you.
So you can see cone 20 there in one of the previous photographs, and if we keep going back, it should be in most of the photographs leading back to photograph number 1. That's correct.
Yeah.
So you can see it, that's right, where the arrow was just pointing then.
So it too was in place when you arrived at the scene?
That is correct.
And there's a cone 7 sitting on top of an old burnt stump. That too was in place when you arrived?
Yes, it was.
Thank you. Could we go back, please, to photograph number 9? Do you recall who it was who asked you to take that photograph?
Not specifically, no.
Right.
It was one of the fire scene investigators, that's all I recall.
Do you have any recollection of what it was you were asked to photograph, other than obviously the area around Cone 20, but do you have any recollection of any discussion about that?
Yes, certainly. So they were particularly interested in the centre of the photograph. There's an area of charcoal near the rocks, or in between Cone 20 and the larger rocks toward the left of the photograph. That was the area that I'm particularly interested in.
Right. Now, opposite you is Mr. Tempone. He has got, over hiding behind the computer, he's got a cursor that you saw being moved around before. If you could ask him to direct or take a screenshot of that first, and then we'll ask him to direct the cursor to put a circle around the area that you identify they were particularly interested in.
Sure. So from the edge of Cone 20 to, there's a large rock toward the left of the photograph. If we circle, that's, yep, so between that rock and the yellow cone number 20, that area there, that's correct.
Right. Now, if Mr. Tempone can put a circle in where he anticipates your evidence is, and then we can move it if need be.
Absolutely. That's very good.
Right. It was the whole of that area, not a specific part of it.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I tend to that.
Yes, thank you. Were all of the others there when you arrived, Constable Needham, on that day?
Yes, they were.
All of the others that you've just mentioned here?
That is correct, yes. The 2 CIB officers and the 3 fire scene examiners were all there.
Thank you.
At Delmore Road.
That is correct.
Right. When you arrived at 2:42, who was present?
Yeah, who was there before you? Or did they all go together?
We all went together.
Right, okay.
So,
That's
in
what I was
fact,
missing.
yeah, I had a look at the photographs just before attending court this morning, excuse me, and I saw in those photographs the 2 CIB officers in photograph number 2, I think it is, as well as photograph number... So, yeah, photograph number 2 has the CIB officers in it on the right edge of the photograph. So you can see there's 2 people just leaning against the car, or one's leaning against the car and the other is bent over toward the bonnet. They're the 2 CIB officers. And there's 2 fire scene investigators that are toward the centre of that photograph, just on the other side of that white building.
And was there a 3rd fire scene investigator there on that day?
That's a good question. I don't recall. I'm sorry.
Right, well,
No, that is a very good question. I'm sorry.
Let's go back to when you met at Delmore Road.
Road,
Your evidence
yes.
was that there were 3
Yes,
fire scene
that's right.
investigators.
Yes, there was.
So now we've got 2:42.
Yes. And there's definitely 2 fire scene investigators here. I can't recall if there was a 3rd one there. I'm sorry.
Right.
Well, there's only one day that Mr Walkley was there.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
There was
that.
only one day that Mr Walkley was there.
Yeah, yes,
and
indeed.
Constable Needham has included Mr Walkley.
Yes.
We can pin it down.
Oh, yeah, well, we certainly can. Yes.
Go to the metadata.
Yes. Yes. Now, if we can just go back, please, to photograph 9 and go to the thumbnails. Right. Now, following photograph 9, after you took that, what did you do?
I then moved into the area outside the cordoned area of the bush and took a series of photographs with one of the fire scene investigators, Barry Bones.
Right. And you took those at his direction?
Yes, I did.
Right. Now, when did you, the evidence indicates that the area shown in, well, I'll start again. The evidence indicates that there was an excavation taking place, that took place at 242 Whitehill Road. You recall that there was that an excavation took place.
That's correct, yes.
Yes. Were you present for it?
I was present at certain stages of that excavation, and I took a series of photos when I was there during that excavation.
Right. Well, now, if we can go to photograph 34. And you may need to go back and look at the thumbnails, but is photograph 34 the first photograph that you took of the excavation?
I believe so, because cone number 13 has now been introduced, and I don't believe I'd photographed that previous to this one.
Right. And were you there when cone 13 was introduced?
No, I actually took the photograph when it was actually there.
Right. Did you see any of the work that's apparently been done in that photograph being done, or did you come back and take a photograph of it?
I came back and took a photograph of it.
Thank you. Now, could we just have a look at the next two photographs, please? And the next one. Right, if we just go back to that one with the 13, you took those two close-up photographs and then you moved off again?
That is correct.
And what did you do when you moved off again?
Okay, if we go back to the thumbnails, so the one that we've just looked at is photograph number 36. So from 37 on, I've moved back into the area of the bushland and taken photographs of those trees showing their trunks and leaves, branches and leaves.
Right. Now, could we go, please, to number 44. You'll see a tree there with a witch's hat next to it.
Yes.
Did you place the do you know who placed the witch's hat there?
I can't be 100% certain, but I think it was Barry Bones.
Right. Now, you took a series of photographs. We'll just go back to the thumbnails to identify that. You took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 photographs. Happy that I've counted that correctly? 6, sorry?
6.
Six.
Yeah, 6 from number, that's all right, it's from photo number 50 to 55.
Right. There was something done during the time over which those photographs were taken.
Oh, sorry, I'm just going back. Sorry, I've got the wrong photographs numbers there. So back,
need to move.
Just up. Sorry, I've given you the wrong numbers there. Photographs 44 to 49.
Yes, yes. So during the time that 45 to 49 were taken, what occurred in relation to the hole? We can see various things, and if you could describe it, please.
Yeah, certainly. So the hole where cone number 20 had been excavated further during that time, and then so photographs number 50 to 56 show.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I think you're misunderstanding my question. During the time over which photographs 44 through to 49 were taken.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Yes. What occurred? We can see various things happening, but can you detail?
Certainly. So 44, for example, just shows the tree with the cone beside it. 45 shows a small hole in the ground near that tree, and 46 shows a close-up of that hole. 47 shows a pole that was then placed into the hole, and some pink spray paint was sprayed on that pole at ground level. 48 shows the pole removed from the hole and a measuring tape placed beside it between the pink marker paint and the tip of the pole, and that indicates the depth of that hole.
Thank you. And 49?
49, then that the earth around that hole was then basically stood on, jumped on, caved in back to the base of that tree where the red cone was placed.
Right. So who stood on it?
Barry Bones.
And you saw when he did that the soil collapsed.
Absolutely.
And the result is that which is seen in photograph 49.
That's correct.
Thank you. Could we have photograph 48 up, please? Now, the depth of that hole was apparently 46 centimetres.
That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, following photograph 49, you returned to the area where cone 20 was, and if we can open up 50, please. And you'll see there that cone 13 had been removed.
That's correct, and the hole has been dug considerably deeper since the last photograph.
Thank you. Do you recall what depth it had been dug to?
No, but one of the later photographs, one of the last ones in this series, so photograph number, if we go back to the thumbnails, there is a tape measure that's been introduced. Photograph number 56, if we just open that one, please. And on the very left edge of the photograph, you can see a 2 metre measure mark on the measuring tape.
Yes.
And then the cone 20 is about the 60 centimetre mark, so the 1.6 metre. So that can only give me a bit of indication that the hole was around about 40 centimetres deep.
Yes. And are you able to recall if, as the hole was dug, if we assume the hole was dug from left to right in this photograph, you were able to, from your memory, state whether that hole, whether the digging went further down or was relatively flat?
Can we just go to one of the previous photographs, maybe number
54, perhaps?
Yeah, 53 or 4, that's good.
53.
So, just looking at that, sorry, I'm just looking at some reference points, but I believe it's actually, excuse me, going down at an angle. How shallow or how deep, I don't know. It's very hard to gauge from the photograph.
All right, can we go back to the thumbnails, please? And if we can get up photograph 50 again. Now, this photograph, as I'm understanding your evidence, was taken when you returned to this particular scene.
That's correct.
Right. Did you see the arrow put in place?
No, I can't recall that, I'm sorry.
Right. Did you see, if we go to the next photograph, you'll see what appears to be charcoal sitting on the arrow and also sitting on the shovel.
That's correct.
Did you see that at any time off the arrow and the shovel before it went on there?
No, I don't recall seeing it. So I don't recall it being placed on. To the best of my memory, it was already on the shovel and on the arrow. I haven't taken any previous photographs in this series that show otherwise, are there?
Could we just go back so you can check, please, Constable?
Thank you. Yeah, no, there's no. So that would have been. Can we just check even just the metadata between this photograph?
Yes.
So if we just right click on photograph 49. Oh yeah, photograph 49. So properties. And thank you. Just looking at the time, so that was 2:06 p.m. on the 6th of January. And then we'll just look at the time on the next photograph if we can. So photograph number 50. 2:07. So it's a minute later. So that's indicating to me that I've walked straight back from where I've taken photograph number 49 and taken photograph number 50 almost immediately afterwards.
Thank you. Now,
Will you be a few minutes? Do you think, Mr.
I'll be 3 or 4 minutes, but
Mr. Armstrong?
No re-examination at the moment, Your Honour.
Well, he's obviously speaking for me, Your Honour. I'll be the re-examiner.
Oh, sorry.
I imagine he meant cross-examination. Well, then we should continue.
Yes, okay.
Certainly.
We'll
Thank you.
finish Constable Needham
Yes.
so I can get away.
Yes, thank you, Your Honour. Now, the next apparent change, and this is a question, occurs, photographs 50, 51 and 52 show the same scene with no changes to it.
That's correct.
Right, the next apparent change is 53.
That is right.
And do you recall who put the pink paint or dust on there?
It wasn't Barry Bones, so it would have either have been Tony Johnson or Steve Walkley.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, now why do you say it wasn't Barry Bones? Do you have a memory of it not being there or just not doing it?
No, I recall Barry and I had been focusing on the vegetation outside that cordoned area, and then it was the other two, or at least one. I'm sorry, I can't recall if there were one or two actually doing the excavation within the cordoned area, and so I believe that was the person who was actually doing the digging with the shovel, placing the markers. So I would believe it, based on that, it was one of those.
Right, who put that? And what is that? That's a forensic
It's
tool?
just pink spray marker paint.
Thank you. And then if we go to 55 and 56, they are photographs of the same area shown in 53 without any relevant change. Is that so? Or did something happen as you were photographing?
Yeah, the only thing that we've added is the tape.
Sorry, you're quite right.
The measuring tape.
The only thing that's happened is the tape's been added. Thank you.
Yeah. So
Now, yeah, sorry.
sorry.
I've interrupted you.
I was just going to say the purpose of the tape obviously was to measure the distance from cone 20 to the base of that hole where the excavation's ended.
And if we look at photo 56, we can get that distance, can we?
It's already got it, it's 1.6 metres.
That's correct.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. Now, at this stage, were you and, were the TFS really starting to run out of time because a helicopter had been booked?
That is correct.
And you left Whitehill Road after photo 56 was taken?
That's correct.
And you went and got a helicopter?
Yes, we did.
And who went on the helicopter with you?
All five of the others plus myself. So there was Steve Walkley, Barry Bones, Tony Johnson, Matthew Adams and John Rafferty, as well as my six, as well as myself.
Well, I must ask, who drove the police vehicle away?
We had two. So we had fire scene examiners had their vehicle, and the police, we had at least one. In fact, we had two vehicles because I had, if we go back up to really early photos, very quickly, photograph number 7, that was my police vehicle, that white Prado. Photograph number, so it's a vehicle that I had, and I was the only one in that one. And then back to the thumbnails. Photograph number, let me see, photograph number 2 is the two police officers, and they're leaning against their vehicle. So there's a silver sedan, that's the vehicle they had. And then photograph number, just close that, just quickly looking. I actually did see it, yes, in photograph number, if we just scroll down a smidgen, I think it's 19. We can just open 19. Yes, yep. So in fact there's 2 fire scene, was at least 3. So there's on the very right of the photograph is my white Prado. Then there's 2 black vehicles, they were the Tasmanian Fire Service. And then there's the silver sedan, which was used by the CIB And there's another car to the left of that photograph, which wasn't part of the police or fire service, and there's another orange car in front of one of those police vehicles, but I don't recall who had that or what that was doing.
All right, well, in short, there were enough bods left at the place to drive the cars away.
Absolutely.
Thank you. If we can go back to the thumbnails, please. And scroll down to the bottom. The remaining photographs are they that you took from the air on that helicopter trip?
That's correct.
Right. Now, at any stage were you asked to video the excavation process?
No, I wasn't.
Were you asked to take any video footage while you were at 242 Whitehill Road?
No, I wasn't.
And you had your video camera with you, did you, at 242?
Yes, I did.
Yes, please.
Yes, thanks. Any changed position, Mr Armstrong?
No change, Your Honour, thank you.
All right, thanks. Thanks very much, Constable Needham, for your attendance. You've relieved on the trial, and we'll adjourn until 2:15.
All stand, please. Someone in the court now stands adjourned to 2:15 p.m.